My foundational concept in life, which is create value, receive value. I don't think you can expect to ever receive value, and however you define value, unless you create value first.
How does a person answer why something happens?
When you look at the findings in different fields,
Scant is the part of life in which we live.
To attain the highest values.
Ali Abdaal, and if you know him, it's like 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, and he was launching an online course, and I responded to someone saying I was going to take the course, and he reached out to me like 10 minutes later saying like, hey, I would love to have you help me like with this specific thing of mentors. And it was like one of those moments like I would have killed to help him, and I did it for like free. I mean, it was just like a no-brainer. But I think there's something about like, because I didn't obviously know this was happening at the time, but he had been a follower of my stuff clearly, and it was almost like a due diligence, because like Twitter is the best place to sort of learn how someone thinks, and so you shortcut that whole due diligence thing with another person, and it's just like can jump straight to collaborating.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You learn a lot about how they think, how they interact with people, the type of things they engage with, how they write. I mean, I think like Twitter forces you to be a concise, punchy writer. You have to be, right? The format, the 280 characters, like you have to be concise and punchy. And so you learn a lot about someone from like the elements of style of their writing. And I've learned a lot by seeing what people do well and just observing from afar and getting better and refining my approach. I mean, when you read my tweets now, you'll realize and notice there's patterns to how I write. The way I write a hook in the opening of a thread, the way I, really space out, like hard space out my tweets so that you never feel like you're reading more than like one sentence at a time. It's never like a block of text that you're just like staring at. I find that daunting. When I see something that has like a block of text in it, I almost just want to go read an article. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do that on Twitter, I'd rather just read an article. And so a lot of these things were learned over time, but a lot of them were just my own observations around what works, like what clicks with people, what drives conversion from one tweet to the next to make sure that people are absorbing the full value of what I'm putting out there. And that I put a lot of time into. Yeah.
And you don't get that unless you're active on Twitter, unless you're on Twitter, like, no, you've got to be there and see what works. And also I think just want to go back to a point you mentioned earlier as well, because you have to think about adding value to the conversation. And I love, like, this is such a good point you brought it back. I want to, you mentioned how like you reposted that initial tweet on like bigger accounts, right? And obviously it was done in a way that added value to it, because that's why the person retweeted it, Chamat and the others you mentioned. Like, I just think like that's we almost glossed over that point. I think that's such an important thing of like how to get started on Twitter. If someone wants to think about like where to start to add value to conversations.
I think there's a few key principles here that I would decompose it around. Number one, my foundational concept in life, which is create value, receive value. I don't think you can expect to ever receive value, and however you define value, unless you create value first. And so that's how I approached everything with Twitter. Like, you can't expect to grow a huge following unless you're creating value for the community or for the people that you want to follow you. And it doesn't have to be 100,000 followers. You might have a tiny little sub niche, but I would rather have 10,000 raving fans or 1,000 raving fan followers than 100,000 people that don't really care about what I post. You need to really ground everything in creating value for the people that you are creating for. That's number one. The other one is the like principle I always took with Twitter and with trying to grow was create great product first, and then hustle for distribution second. When you're starting out, you have no distribution. I mean, there's nothing, right? I had 500 followers when I posted that first thread. So if I hadn't hustled for distribution around it, I knew I had created great product. I had sat down, spent a ton of time on it. I knew it was really good, but there was no distribution. It was going out to 500 people, maybe 100 would see it, and it would have gone nowhere. And I don't know where I would be today, or I probably wouldn't be talking to you. And so the hustle for distribution was key. I reposted it under, if you go search it, like I reposted it under probably 50 people's pieces of content, and maybe like 2 or 3 of them retweeted it. I'm sure it was like super annoying at the time that I did that for a lot of them, but I knew it was really good. And I knew that if someone read it, they would find value in it. So I didn't feel, in a sense, it's a little shameless self-promotion. In another sense, I knew that anyone that read it would find value and learn. And so I didn't feel bad about it. I still don't, because I think it's a powerful thing. And now it's funny for me because I see the full circle of it, where I posted that under Chamath's tweet. He retweeted it. That kind of got me started, jumped me up a bunch. A couple of weeks ago, a young man on Twitter posted something under my tweet that I thought was interesting, and I retweeted it. And he went from like, I don't know, he had 20 followers at the time, and I think he's over 1,000 over the next night. And so he commented on it saying like, oh, you're doing the thing that Chamath did to you when you started. And so it was a cool moment of reflection for me of like, you know, continue to pay it forward, right? Give back to the community in a way, give back to people. That's why I leave my DMs open. That's why I try to respond to people that send me good intention, well-natured DMs. And I just think it's something I feel really strongly about.